Okay, welcome to a little flip lesson on patterns. The first thing I want to discuss is to make sure we understand a couple of vocabulary terms and know what directions columns, rows, and diagonals run. Take a moment to study this chart and memorize the directions of each of these terms. Next thing you need to know for the test are the different kinds of number patterns. We will look at 4 of them. The first is a repeating pattern. A repeating pattern has a sequence of numbers or letters that repeat themselves. The first 4 terms, 2, 5, 2, 3, are called the core. The core of a pattern is the smallest part that repeats. In a growing pattern, the numbers get bigger in a predictable way. You can make a growing pattern by adding a number. 1, 4, 7, 10. The rule is start at 1, then add 3 each time. You can make a pattern by multiplying. 1, 2, 4, 8. The pattern rule here, start at 1, multiply by 2 each time. A shrinking pattern is one in which the numbers get smaller in a predictable way. 71, 66, 61. Try and decode how the numbers are changing. Because they are shrinking, it's a shrinking pattern. They're getting smaller. They are shrinking by 5 each time. Knowing this, we can predict the next few terms. The pattern rule is start at 71, then subtract 5 each time. This is a hundreds chart. It can be described in 2 ways. There is a position pattern that we can describe. The position pattern is a diagonal. It runs 1 down, 1 to the right. It can also be described with a pattern rule. For your test, when it comes to writing pattern rules, I want you to write 2 sentences or 3 sentences. The first sentence will always begin with the word start. In this case, the pattern rule is start at 1. Your second sentence will start with the word then. The then sentence is where we describe how the pattern is changing. Start at 1, then add 11 each time. For each pattern rule you see on the test, decode how the pattern is changing. There are different types of patterns that we will look at. A growing pattern is one in which the numbers grow. They get larger, but they grow in a predictable way. That's why it is a number pattern. Here is another hundreds chart. Look at the chart. Can you write a pattern rule for this chart? The pattern rule would be start at 1, then add 2, then increase the number you add by 1 each time. Another way to say it is like this. Start at 1, then add 2, then add 1 more than you did last time. If you look at the numbers, you can see that they grow in a predictable way. We've added 2, then we add 3, then we add 4. You should be able to look at this pattern and predict the next 3 terms. Look at the pattern in this chart. Look at the numbers in red. What kind of a pattern is it? Because the numbers are getting bigger, we know that this is a growing pattern, not a shrinking pattern or a repeating pattern. But how is it growing? Are we adding? I noticed 1 between 2 and 4, and then 3 between 4 and 8, and we would think that if you're adding, the next one would be 5. But 5 isn't going to work. So it's not one where we add 1 and increase the number by 2. Look again and we notice that multiplication is at work with this one. The pattern rule is start at 2, then multiply by 2 each time. Consider these numbers, 1, 4, 9, and 16. What kind of a pattern is this? The numbers are getting bigger, so this is a growing pattern. In order to figure out the next few terms, you need to decode it. Try and determine how the pattern is growing. Are we adding or multiplying? See how much difference there is between each number. Perhaps you can figure out the pattern. Okay, we've determined how this pattern is growing. It goes from 3 to adding 5 to adding 7, which means that we need to add 9 to the next frame. Write a pattern rule for this. Our pattern rule would read like this. Start at 1, then add 3. Then increase the number you add by 2 each time. Another way to write it would be start at 1, then add 3, then add 2 more than you did last time. Let's pretend that these 4 numbers were the top 4 layers of a pyramid. Would you be able to predict how many cubes would be in the 7th layer? Working with the pattern, we need to continue to increase each frame by adding 2 more than last time. Let's imagine that we are going to continue to add cubes to the 7th layer. Can you predict how many cubes will be in the 7th layer, or how many cubes there will be in this pyramid in total? Let's continue to build the frames in a chart form. Okay, we've created a chart in order to continue our pattern. We started with 1 frame, we added 3, and that brought us to 4. Then we add 5, which brought us to 9, and we added 7, which brings us to 16. So to 16, we're going to have to add 9. To that frame, we'll add 11, and so forth. Let's determine how many are in the 7th frame. I'm going to ask you to pause the video, determine the answer yourself, and compare if you are correct. By continuing the number pattern, we are able to determine that there will be 49 cubes in the 7th layer of our pyramid. Another part of our test will be equations. The definition of an equation is this. An equation is a statement that 2 things are equal. An addition fact is an equation. 3 plus 8 equals 11. By the same token, 3 plus 8 equals 6 plus 5, because both sides equal 11. We know that an equation means that both sides are equal. Pause the video and try these examples on a scratch sheet of paper. After you have completed your work, compare your work to the answers as you resume the video. Okay, let's consider the answers. Remember that an equation means both sides have to be equal. 16 minus 7 is 9, and 9 equals 9. 17 equals 6 plus something plus 3. Add the 6 and 3 together and you get 9. Then you have to figure out what is the difference between 17 and 9. You subtract and you realize the missing number is 8. In the next example, 8 equals something minus 3. Well, the number has to be bigger than 8. You think the answer might be 5. That's a common mistake. 8 equals 11 minus 3 because 11 minus 3 is 8. In the next example, 18 take away something equals 11. 18 minus 11 will give us the answer. The answer is 7. In the next example, 26 take away 10 is 16. 16 must equal 16. 140 plus 65 equals 50 plus another number. This is a little harder, so let's look at how this answer was solved below. It might be a good idea to add the 2 terms on each side first. 140 plus 65 is 205. Now we know that 205 must equal 205. 205 equals 50 plus how much? In order to know how much, let's go back and subtract 50 from 205. 205 minus 50 gives us 155. Now we realize that 140 plus 65 and 50 plus 155 each equal 205. Why is 22 minus 7 equal 35 minus 20? How do we know that this is an equation? Again, do the work on either side. 22 minus 7 is 15. Then determine that 35 minus 20 is 15, and you can see that both sides equal the same amount. These are sample questions you can expect on equations on the test. Let's consider this equation. Cindy and Barbara made cookies for a fundraiser. Barbara made a dozen brownies and a half a dozen date squares. Cindy made 10 chocolate chip cookies. How many tarts must Cindy prepare so that she will contribute an equal amount of baked goods for the fundraiser? Write an equation to show your work. The first step in solving this problem would be to map it out on a scratch sheet of paper. Make an equation for Cindy and one for Barbara. We know that both sides must equal the same amount. The next step is to figure out Cindy's total. We can figure out the answer for Barbara by adding to 10 to get to 18 or subtracting 10 from 18. Either way will give us the answer. 18 minus 10 is 8. 10 plus 8 equals 18. Barbara will need to bring 8 tarts so that they have an equal amount of baked goods for this fundraiser.